So yeah, this is only about a year late. Sorry about that. The next video, we'll look at the Radeon side and see how things have changed there. So in all reality, this video is about a year late coming to you guys, and I really do apologize for various reasons. See, when we did the GeForce Then and Now, where we compared the GTX 660 Ti to the GTX 1060 to see kind of where NVIDIA's performance had come from, like where it was and where it is now, utilizing modern games at the time that the video was done, and to see the improvements that we got. And we got a lot of good feedback from that, and a lot of people were very happy, and we had promised to do a Radeon retrospective version, and of course that's what this video is. But I wanted to explain what took so long. So first off, I wanted to compare some of the RX 480, which is what we are using, it's still sitting on the test bench behind me, in this video. And we wanted to use it and compare it to the then kind of flagship, which was the HD 7970. Well, as we got closer to Vega's launch, we were hoping to maybe compare the 7970 to Vega, and it just seemed like it kept not happening. So what I did when we got a 500 series refresh was wanted to take a refresh versus refresh from about the same perspective. So we're going to compare the R9 280X to the RX 570, and that wasn't going to quite work out because, well, then we were going to have, it just didn't really kind of pan out. So we tried a lot of different things and ultimately settled on this. This is the HD 7870 compared to the modern counterpart, the RX 480. And before anybody panics and wonders why would I say these are, the 480 is a modern day counterpart, they're so different. You're right, they are. And that's kind of the big thing here, is we're looking at a class to class comparison as well as a die size to die size. See, that's one of the advantages of moving to 14 nanometer was you have the option of either shrinking the die and, well, you can either do power savings or performance increases. But what we've seen is the die size stayed about the same, but we're packing in quite a few more stream processors as well as clock rate. So let's take a look at the general specifications of the HD 7870 and then the RX 480. So the HD 7870 was Pitcairn based, the Pitcairn XT. It was 28 nanometers and the die size was 212 millimeters. The GPU core clock came in at 1000 megahertz, making it the gigahertz edition, with the memory clocked at 1200 megahertz or 4800 megahertz effective. Memory was only at 2 gigabytes, which at the time was perfectly fine, at GDDR5 on a 256-bit bus with 153 gigabits per second, or gigabytes rather, of memory bandwidth. Shading unit or stream processors of 1280 with 80 TMUs, 32 ROPs, and 20 compute units, coming in at 2.5 teraflops of performance at 175 watt TDP. Fast forward later to the RX 480, which is running on the Ellesmere GPU, or Ellesmere XT to be exact, and this is the 4th generation architecture of GCN, whereas Pitcairn was GCN 1.0. The die size is a little bit bigger at 232 millimeters squared over the 212, so still roughly the same die size there. Now the GPU core clock has been bumped to 1120 megahertz with a new boost feature going up to 1266. Memory clocks in at 2 gigahertz or 2000 megahertz with an 8000 megahertz effective rate. And the memory is quadrupled up to 8 gigabytes of GDDR5 on the same 256-bit bus, but thanks to the speed increases, we're looking at 256 gigabits per second rather than 153. Shading units has nearly doubled at 2304 with 144 TMUs versus the 80. ROP stayed the same at 32 and compute units increased to 36. Of course, they had to accommodate the more stream processors. Looking at a 5.8 teraflop performance package here at 150 watt TDP. So it's potentially less TDP, but roughly, well, more than double the floating point performance. What does all this mean in games? So we tested it on the X370 test bench that we have with the Ryzen 7 1700 running at 3.9 gigahertz with 16 gigs of DDR4 3200 megahertz RAM with the G.Skill Flare X kit. on the X370 MSI X-Power Gaming Titanium. So we run both cards at stock 11.4 drivers, so the absolute latest that we ran all these games today. We only ran 5 games, but it's just to give you an overall idea of performance. And we did take a look at performance by power and temperatures. So those are kind of interesting, and I'll explain those when we get to them. But first off, on our game benchmarks, we have Grand Theft Auto 5 run at 1080p with the high settings with FXAA and no MSAA to see what kind of performance we get. The HD77 pulled out a respectable 79 average FPS, while the RX 480 did 147. Quite often push up into that area where the frame rate is, well, too high and causes that game to have some issues. But remember, no MSAA, FXAA only, and high settings. No very high. So still respectable, but we're looking at nearly double the performance on the RX 480 and then a little bit more. So moving on to Middle-earth: Shadow of War, we see, again, more than doubling of the performance from the 480. The HD 7870 pulls out 31 FPS at 1080p with the high preset, and it did go over the memory allocations, but that's just the reality of the way games are now. So you're looking at going from 31 to 69 average FPS, and even the 1% lows were well above the average FPS of the 7870. So it's very cool to see that. Moving on to Battlefield 1 running on high detail settings at DirectX 11, we see the average FPS, well, a little less than double for the RX 480. We're seeing it run at 114 compared to the HD 7870 62 FPS, which is more than respectable, and the minimum 1% lows is quite good, again staying above the HD 7870. Moving into Dirt Rally, we see again the 7870 pulling back around to the 60 FPS mark, but the RX 480 doubling it once again, roughly doubling it, and roughly doubling on the 1% lows and the 0.1% lows. So that's good to see that there. See quite substantial gains there. Now moving into Wolfenstein 2, we definitely wanted to test this game because of all of its advanced features that it supports on the AMD cards and takes advantage of the newer ones, and we really couldn't test Doom on Vulkan with the 7870 because it requires more than the 2 gigabytes of VRAM that the card has to allocate. So looking at this, we see nearly triple the performance on average FPS. We're talking from 54 to 153 running on high preset 1080p, no anti-aliasing, very important to remember that here. So no anti-aliasing on this one. And even the 0.1% lows are nearly double the average FPS of the 7870. 7870 actually put up a very unenjoyable playability at these settings. So if you have a 7870 and you want to play that game, recommend dropping the settings quite a bit. So what about power and thermals? Well, power was interesting because you have to remember when you run a, let's just be honest, the 7870 was definitely not was the bottleneck in that system. So the 1700 had no problem pushing it to its fullest. So you saw a total system draw of 225 watts, but with the RX 480, because it could stretch its legs quite a bit more, pulled the total system power draw to 284. I know somebody's going to be out there going, wow, it went up 50 watts. Well, yeah, it did, because you're able to pull more power total system. So that's actually, well, not bad. Moving into thermals, the HD 7870 did, well, run cooler than the RX 480, and I can actually tell you exactly why that is. It's a much better cooling unit used on the 7870. I wish they'd used this same cooler design over on the RX 480. I think we would have seen much better thermals out of the box. We're talking about the difference between a solid copper heat-piped cooling system to a copper slug pumped into an aluminum, well, rather thin aluminum heatsink array. So that's why you see higher temperatures on the RX 480. At the end of the day, you see quite a substantial jump from GCN 1.0 to 4.0. So it's a good scaling in that class. So, I mean, we always would like to see more performance. I mean, who doesn't? And definitely would have liked to see better thermals on the RX 480. And I know that the RX 580 has been pushed out by now, but that's all board partner cards, and these two are both reference models, and it's good to see where a reference design was and where it is today. Albeit a year late, I know the card came out. Again, many apologies for that, but this is what we're looking at now, and I really wanted to share this with you guys. As a matter of fact, the next thing I'm going to be working on in the Radeon world is Well, we've got that liquid-cooled Vega 64, and we still have the R9 295X2. I think it'd be really cool to see where those two plotted against each other, both at 1440p gaming. If you enjoyed the video, let us know. If you have any questions or comments, you know where to leave those down in the comment section. This has been Keith with WCCF Tech TV, and as always, we'll catch you in the next video.